Welcome to today's podcast. Continuing the study of the Great Controversy, we will focus on Chapter 11, Protest of the Princes. Are you ready? Let's begin. One of the noblest testimonies ever expressed in support of the Reformation was the protest offered by the Christian princes of Germany at the Diet of Spires in 1529. The courage, faith, and firmness of those men of God gained for succeeding ages liberty of thought and of conscience. Their protest gave to the Reformed Church the name of Protestant, and its principles are the very essence of Protestantism. The Protest of Spires was a testimony against religious intolerance and an affirmation of the right to worship God according to one's conscience. One of the immovable principles of the Reformation is the separation of church and state. Mixing spiritual matters with material interests had the effect of corrupting the church. The Reformers were unwilling to make such a mistake again. As Luther wrote, "Fear not, the cross of Christ must be carried. We can do more with our prayers than all our enemies can with their boasts." It was clear to Luther that the Reformation would triumph thanks to God and not to the weapons of secular or political power. The Pope had convinced the Emperor to defend his cause in Germany, and Charles V did everything possible to satisfy the Pontiff's demands. The problem with these allies is that they did not understand that their struggle was not against the Reformer and his doctrines, but against the God who inspired the Reformer and to whom the doctrines pointed. Time after time, the immediate destruction of those who dared to oppose Rome had seemed inevitable. But at the critical moment, the armies of Turkey would appear on the eastern frontier, or else the King of France or the Pope himself, jealous of the growing greatness of the Emperor, would make war upon him, and thus, amidst the tumult and strife of nations, the Reformation had been able to spread and strengthen itself. In 1529, the Emperor convened a second meeting in Spires. Although religious freedom had been legally established, an edict of the Emperor cancelled it. The evangelical states did not want to tolerate such an outrage of their rights and reclaimed the freedom that had previously been granted to them. The meeting between Papists and Reformers ended with the agreement that satisfied only the Papists. It was agreed that in places where the Reformed faith had already been embraced, no controversial subjects should be preached. Furthermore, in other places, Catholic believers will not be allowed to embrace the Lutheran faith. This decree meant the end of the Reformation. It was an explicit prohibition of free speech and a strange peace that brought the entire empire back under the rule of Rome. However, the German princes would not submit to such a law. In matters of conscience, the majority has no power, they said, rejecting the desire imposed upon them to silence their consciences already enlightened by the Word of God. With power and with courage, trusting in divine providence, these princes protested against the arbitrary authority of the Church and also against the interference of the civil magistrate. This protest caused them to be known as the Protestants. The principles of Protestantism are clear: the power of conscience over the magistrate, and the authority of the Word of God over the visible Church. The Protest of Spires was a solemn testimony against religious intolerance and an affirmation of the right of all men to worship God according to the dictates of their own conscience. Such a resolution was embraced by all of evangelical Germany as an expression of their faith. The Reformation was now unstoppable because it had built upon Christ, and the gates of hell could not prevail against it. Without a doubt, the experience of the early Reformation will be repeated in the end times, where we will need to stand firm against the invitation to false worship that the union of church and state will want to impose in the last days. We will need to assert the right to worship God according to our own conscience. That's why, now more than ever, we need to be connected to the God of the Reformation.